Senator from California.
Mr. President, I thank you, and I would like to call up and make pending Amendment 711 to the bill before us.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Senator from California, Mrs. Feinstein, for
Mr. President, I ask that the reading of the
711.
amendment be suspended.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I happen to be on the floor and hear the remarks of the Majority Leader, and I just want to say thank you to him for his support of this legislation. It is extraordinarily important to me, to the people of my state, and I believe to a majority of Americans, and I hope to make that clear during my remarks. Mr. President, I would like to also thank the 23 co-sponsors of this legislation. They are, in alphabetical order, Richard Blumenthal, Senators Boxer, Cardin, Carper, Cowan, Durbin, Franken, Gillibrand, Harkin, Hirano, Klobuchar, Lautenberg, Levin, Menendez, Mikulski, Murphy, Murray, Reid, Rockefeller, Schatz, Schumer, Warren, and Whitehouse. I am very grateful for your and for their willingness to step up, show courage, and do what's right for America. Mr. President, there are all kinds of issues that we confront as members of this great Senate. There are issues of national security, the economy, health care, immigration, all tough issues. People often ask me why I care so much about assault weapons, why I have stayed with this issue for more than 20 years now. The answer is this. In my view, the proliferation of this specific type of weapon goes to the heart of what kind of society in which we want to live. It goes to what kind of culture we're going to raise our children in. And that, Mr. President, brings us to the horrific massacre at Newtown, Connecticut, 4 months ago. Sandy Hook, and a lot has been said about it, but I can't forget it. Sandy Hook was a safe school in a safe town. Candidly, it was inconceivable that such a tragedy could happen there, but it did. I can't exaggerate how this senseless murder of 20 beautiful young children and 6 incredibly brave adults affected me and millions around this country. I think it's fair to say that this event really shocked the conscience of America. The pictures of these little victims still bring tears to the eyes of millions. I have been very impressed with one page of the New York Daily News, and I carry it when I talk to people trying to get their votes, and some say no, and I look at this picture of these smiling faces, and in the middle, shame on us. This was the cover of the New York Daily News, and I think it carries the message of what we are trying to do here, and I hope to show that during the time I speak. I think despair that we all felt, for some of us, has changed to determination. And this amendment, I believe, over time, will finally begin to address not only the wanton, brutal violence, but the weapon that's often used to carry out that wanton, brutal violence. To have a chance at understanding these mass shootings, I think we have to understand how they're perpetrated and by whom. It's really impossible to know with any certainty what motivated Adam Lanza, the Newtown shooter. But we know that he exhibited clear signs of mental disturbance. We know he had an extreme aversion to normal social life, that he didn't like physical contact. He was in and out of school. He spent time in special education classrooms, and he was homeschooled by his mother. He lived in a room with blacked out curtains and played violent video games for hours on end. We know his mother bought him assault weapons and kept an arsenal at home. We know they went target shooting together at ranges and that both were certified in gun safety. Their home was a veritable weapons depot with many firearms, more than 1,600 rounds of ammunition, samurai swords, even a gun safe in this young man's room. It has been reported that Adam compiled a spreadsheet documenting hundreds of victims of mass murders, something he may have used as a measuring stick for his own sadistic plot. And we know one thing. None of this information would have been caught on a background check. And I say that although I support background check. But this just shows what is out there that needs to be stopped. On that December morning, Adam Lanza started this rampage by killing his mother. He then drove to Sandy Hook. He shot his way into the school. He was heavily armed. This is what he carried: a Bushmaster XM-15 assault rifle, a Glock handgun, a Sig Sauer handgun, 10 30-round magazines, and a Sega 12-gauge assault shotgun. In less than 5 minutes, he fired at least 154 rounds from the Bushmaster in 2 classrooms. He stopped only when first responders arrived. He then took his own life. He died with 139 more rounds available to fire. Mr. President, I'm sure background checks will stop many would-be murderers, but they would not have prevented Newtown. The weapons were legally purchased by his mother, and while he was disturbed, he had no criminal record or record of mental illness and would not have been subject to a background check because his mother gave him these weapons. Let me be clear. Universal background checks are very important. I strongly support them, but they would not have prevented the tragedy in Newtown. I have watched these mass shootings escalate over the past 40 years, 4 decades of my public life. 29 have taken place in just the past decade, 7 in the past year. Military-style assault weapons are often the weapon used in many of these shootings. Just 3 days before Newtown, an AR-15 assault rifle was used to kill 2 people and seriously wound a 3rd at a mall in Clackamas, Oregon. 5 months before Newtown, a gunman opened fire in a theater, of all things, at a late-night performance of a brand-new movie. He killed 12. He injured 58. And the only reason he didn't continue was that this drum that he had in his weapon, a 100-round drum, jammed at approximately 50. Although the Aurora shooter was being treated by mental health professionals, he owned a small arsenal of weapons, including a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 assault rifle, a Remington 12-gauge shotgun, 2 Glock 40 caliber handguns, and a 100-round ammunition drum. The number of weapons used in the 1999 massacre at Columbine in Littletown, Colorado, 13 were killed. A Tech DC-9 assault pistol was used, a high-point 9mm carbine, a Savage pump-action shotgun, and a Savage 311D 12-gauge shotgun. High-capacity ammunition magazines also play a role in these mass shootings. In 2011, a gunman in Tucson used a semi-automatic Glock handgun equipped with a 33-round magazine to kill 6 and wound 12, including Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. And in 2007, a Virginia Tech gunman used 2 handguns and at least 19 magazines to kill 32 and wound 17. Some of these magazines were 15-round versions. All told, he had nearly 400 rounds to fire. Now, has this ended with Newtown? Was Newtown such a stirring event on the conscience of America that no one would try it again? What is the answer? The answer is no. On March 18th, just 3 months after Sandy Hook, a former student at the University of Central Florida planned to set off a fire alarm in his apartment and kill students as they fled. A roommate saw him with these weapons, called the police. The police came quickly and were able to prevent another massacre. Here's what he had: a .22 caliber assault rifle, known as a German sports gun GSG-5, a .45 caliber handgun, 2 110-round magazines, 4 homemade explosive devices, and a stockpile of approximately 1,000 rounds. And on March 31st, an AR-15 assault rifle was used to assassinate a district attorney and his wife in Texas. The district attorney's wife innocently opens the door of their home. A gunman shot and killed her with a single bullet. As her husband turned to try to get to his weapon, he was killed in a burst of at least 20 rounds. That's the offensive nature of these weapons. A shooting many years ago, because I got to know some of the victims involved who survived, encouraged me to submit the first bill in 1994. And that was an attack by a man by the name of John Luigi Ferri on an office in a very high office building in San Francisco called 101 California Street. He came in, killed 8, had 2 Tech-9s, and magazines holding 50 rounds of ammunition. He killed a young mother, Judy Pizzato, 30, who had recently given birth to her first child. As her neighbor said, she just had that little lovely baby 10 months ago. I got to know Jody's husband, Steve, who was a tall, wonderful man who used to come and see me with his baby in his arms. I'm delighted that he has since remarried and made a new life for himself. He also killed Donald Mike Merrill, who had recently adopted 2 children, a son and a daughter, aged 4 and 12, with his wife, Marilyn. And one of the wounded, a beautiful young woman, Michelle Scully, was saved because her husband, John, died while jumping on her body, shielding her from the gunfire. This is how these events unfold. The tragedies they leave behind are actually never completely recoverable from. Over the years, as I've watched, I have come to see that these weapons are attractive to 2 groups of people. One are collectors, target practicers, some hunt, and some think they offer a strong defense. That's one group. But death tolls show that there is another group who covet these firearms more for their deadly firepower, most notably grievance killers, gang members, and juveniles. Their goal is to kill indiscriminately. These are weapons that are easy to fire quickly. They can fire many times without overheating, and they can carry ammunition feeding devices that exceed 100 rounds. These are the weapons of choice of this group of people. So the question comes, can this group of people who will kill with these weapons buy these weapons easily? And the answer is today, yes. These weapons are attractive to gang members because pistol grips and folding stocks make them easy to conceal and maneuver. And these weapons pack enough firepower to confront other gangs as well as the police. I would like to tell you one other story from my home city that touched me deeply. in 2004 when undercover police officers Isaac Espinosa and Barry Parker confronted a man at the corner of Newcomb Avenue and Newhall Street in San Francisco. As the officers approached, the shooter pulled out an AK-47 from beneath his coat and fired 14 rounds, killing Officer Espinosa and injuring Officer Parker, both of whom were armed. Officer Espinosa was a real up-and-comer in the San Francisco Police Department. Everyone liked him, and he had real credibility on the streets of the Bayview Hunters Point community and was very special. He had been a police officer for 8 years, and during that time he received 4 major service awards. The current police chief, Greg Suhr, said he wouldn't have been surprised if Officer Espinosa rose to be the chief himself one day, but he's gone. He left behind a wife of 7 years, Renata, their daughter Isabella, who was 3 at the time of the murder. Finally, assault weapons are attractive to juveniles because they're lightweight, have little recoil, and are easy to fire. The takeaway is that nowhere seems safe from these acts of mass violence, made all the more deadly because of the military features of these particular weapons. These mass killings aren't confined to dangerous areas. They happen in a mall in Clackamas. They happen in a movie theater in Aurora. They happen in a temple in Oak Creek. They happen in an office in San Francisco. And worst of all, they happen now in schools. Schools used to be safe places, but now we confront the legacy of Columbine, Virginia Tech, and Newtown. President Obama relayed the story of a murdered child's mother. She said she hates when people say her son was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Where are schools ever the wrong place? Schools should always be the right place for children, and they should always be the right time. And that's why we must take action. I'm relieved we're finally debating the issue of gun violence, in particular the amendment I offer today to introduce the assault weapons ban in the underlying bill. It has been 9 years since the first federal assault weapons ban expired in 2004, and far too many deaths. The assault weapons ban I offer today as an amendment has one purpose: to begin to dry up the future supply of assault weapons and high-capacity ammunition magazines over time, which will save lives. It does not affect any legally owned weapon possessed now. I fully support the bill to expand background checks, increase penalties on straw purchasers, and strengthen school security. But these provisions are only part of a solution. The weapons I talk about can fire hundreds of rounds a minute with velocities and energy far exceeding the standard handguns. They don't belong on the streets, where they can be bought without questions asked. This amendment bans the future manufacture, possession, sales, and importation of 157 semi-automatic assault weapons by make and model. Let me list some of the most infamous models that you have here a display. They include the AK-47, the AR-15, the Bushmaster XM-15, the Smith & Wesson M&P 15, the Hi-Point carbine, the Uzi mini carbine, and the Intratec DC-9. They include the MAC-10, the Sega-12, the Street Sweeper, and 157 of them are explicitly by make and model delineated in the bill. The bill also prospectively bans the manufacture, sale, and importation of all other assault weapons that can accept a detachable magazine and have at least one military characteristic, such as a pistol grip or barrel shroud. Finally, the amendment bans the manufacture and importation, as well as the future sale or transfer of large-capacity ammunition feeding devices capable of accepting more than 10 rounds. These large magazines, and here are some of them, and this is the drum that was used at Aurora. In many cases, like the tragic shooting of Congresswoman Giffords, it is only when a shooter stops to switch magazines that police or others have the chance to take the shooter down. And he or she may well fumble in so doing. What does the amendment not do? To clear up some misinformation, it's also important to note what the bill does not do. It does not take away any legally owned weapon. All weapons legally possessed on the date of enactment are exempted. The amendment does not require registration. If an assault weapon is legally owned before enactment and later transferred or sold, the recipient or purchaser must pass a background check as required in the underlying bill. Finally, the amendment does not affect hunting or sporting firearms, and let me point that out. It protects legitimate hunters by excluding 2,258 specifically named firearms used for hunting and sporting purposes. It took 96 pages of legal bill language to list these hunting and sporting firearms by make and model, so everyone can see clearly that their hunting or sporting gun is excluded from the bill. It took my staff a long time and a lot of vetting to compile this list, but they have done it. Some have argued that the legislation would violate the Second Amendment. Candidly, that's wrong. The original federal assault weapons ban I sponsored in 1994 was repeatedly challenged in federal court on a variety of grounds, including the Second Amendment, the Commerce Clause, the Due Process Clause, and the Equal Protection Clause. The Fourth, Sixth, Ninth, and District of Columbia Circuit Courts all upheld the '94 law, with 3 of them rejecting challenges based on the Second Amendment. Since these rulings, the Supreme Court in 2008 recognized an individual right under the Second Amendment in a 5-4 decision in the District of Columbia v. Heller. But Heller itself clearly rejects the claim that Second Amendment rights are absolute. In Heller, conservative Justice Antonin Scalia stated, and I quote, "The right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited." And the court said, the Second Amendment does not protect, quote, "a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purposes," end quote. Case made. Also, just like other constitutional rights, the Second Amendment's right to keep and bear arms is subject to reasonable restrictions. An assault weapons ban is such a reasonable restriction, and no assault weapon ban has ever been overturned by a court of law. Don't take my word for it. Look at the Supreme Court decisions. Justice Scalia's opinion in Heller specifically stated, and I quote, "Weapons most useful in military service, M16 rifles and the like," end quote, "are weapons that, quote, may be banned," end quote. And there are weapons that are the like of the M16 weapon on the street today that are covered by this bill. Third, an assault weapons ban leaves available ample means for individuals to defend themselves and their families using firearms. This amendment imposes restriction on one class of weapons, military-style weapons, that are highly dangerous and can kill large numbers of people quickly with increasing velocity. It leaves open ample opportunities to possess and use numerous types of firearms for defense. I have no question that this bill is constitutional. A second false attack is that assault weapons covered by this ban contain only cosmetic features and are no more dangerous than any other firearm. Nonsense. Law enforcement officers and gun experts are the best ones to go to, and we have. And they have pointed out that these features were designed to be added to military weapons to make them more deadly. And they have the same effect on civilian versions. Some examples. The pistol grip was first added to a rifle by the German Army in World War II, when it was incorporated in the STG-44. That's called a storm gun. This feature allows a shooter to spray fire a large number of rounds over a broad killing zone without having to aim at each individual target. Folding stocks were added to the M1 carbine by the United States Army in World War II, so the weapon could be more easily transported by soldiers traveling in cramped aircraft and military vehicles. Similarly, Uzi manufacturers started adding folding stocks to their weapons in the early 1950s at the request of Dutch and German military who found the traditional wooden stock to be too long for use while traveling in armored vehicles. Every law enforcement officer who testified on the assault weapons ban in the judiciary hearing was emphatic that military characteristics add to a weapon's lethality. From Baltimore County Police Chief Jim Johnson, assault weapons are, quote, meant for the battlefield, end quote. Milwaukee Chief of Police Ed Flynn, quote, military characteristics are not simply cosmetic in nature. These weapons are designed for combat, end quote. And John Walsh, the United States Attorney for Colorado, couldn't be more clear. These weapons, he said, are, quote, crafted to be as effective as possible at killing human beings, end quote. Now, where are we today? 7 states and the District of Columbia banned assault weapons prior to the Newtown massacre. These are my own state, California, Connecticut, D.C., Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New York, and New Jersey. Since Newtown, legislators in 20 states have introduced bills to either ban assault weapons or strengthen existing bans. 20 states are now contemplating action. Connecticut and New York passed laws to tighten their existing bans to prohibit assault weapons with one military characteristic, which is what we do in this bill. Maryland expanded an existing ban on assault pistols to cover rifles and assault shotguns. In Massachusetts and New Jersey, bills have been introduced to strengthen those states' assault weapons bans. Efforts are also underway to prohibit these deadly weapons in states with no current assault weapon ban. In Florida, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Missouri, Mississippi, North Dakota, New Mexico, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Vermont, and Virginia, bills have been introduced to impose an assault weapons ban for the first time. All of these states have strong hunting or sporting traditions, but the sponsors of these bills recognize that no one needs an assault weapon to hunt or target shoot. In other states, bills have been introduced to regulate assault weapons. An Arizona bill would require the sale of any assault weapon be done through a licensed gun dealer. Bills in Kentucky and Texas would require one to obtain a license to purchase an assault weapon. The Kentucky bill would also require the registration of assault weapons and handguns. That's Kentucky. And some bills have been introduced that would go even further than the amendment I have introduced today. California is seeking to strengthen its ban, going from a 1 characteristic test to a 0 characteristic test. This bill would prohibit any semi-automatic rifle capable of accepting a detachable magazine. A bill in South Carolina would require the government to seize any assault weapons used in certain crimes. Even though more states are banning assault weapons, the need for a federal ban has never been greater. If only California or New York bans assault weapons, nothing stops an individual from buying an assault weapon in a neighboring state, then crossing the border to commit violence. At a Judiciary hearing, committee hearing, Senator Durbin mentioned that guns are coming into the city of Chicago, which are being traced to the state of Mississippi. I believe that if this legislation does not pass, we will see bills pass in a number of states. That will result in a confusing patchwork of law with different standards in different states. If this bill goes down, states will, I believe, pass additional legislation. It is only a question of time. Some suggest there may not be enough support in the Senate to pass the assault weapons ban, but the support is there among the American people. In poll after poll, that support is there. In no poll, even with all the discussion, even with the mobilization of gun owners and NRA, a majority in every single national poll done shows that the majority wants and controls over assault weapons. I know of no poll done this year that shows less than a majority to reinstate a federal ban on assault weapons. And we have more than 170 organizations covering a wide range of groups who have endorsed the bill. Here are just a few: Major City Chiefs, International Association of Chiefs of Police, American Medical Association, American Academy of Nursing, American Academy of Pediatrics, National Education Association, American Federation of Teachers, the Children's Defense Fund, the Sierra Club, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the United States Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, more than 800 mayors from across the country, Tom Ridge, former governor and Homeland Security Secretary, John Warner, former Republican senator from Virginia. Few bills ever have such broad support, and I ask for consent, Madam President, to place a list of endorsements carried here into the record.
Without objection.
I've also received letters and calls from Americans across the country, from all walks of life, including gun owners, who demand that we stop these weapons of war from claiming more innocent victims. I even had a member of the NRA call me on the telephone and say, I am a hunter and I have an AR-15, but I don't need it and I am turning it in. I ask that to place excerpts from these letters in the record, if I may.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. To conclude, not every issue we vote on in the Senate is a life or death matter. I deeply believe this is. Since the original federal assault weapons ban expired in 2004, there have been more than 460 incidents involving assault weapons. And here they are listed, 460 of them. The most important duty a government has is to protect its citizens' safety. When 20 beautiful first graders are slaughtered, our government has failed that duty. When 12 are killed and 58 are wounded in a movie theater, a safe place, our government has failed its duty. When people are gunned down in malls, parking lots, and their offices, our government has failed that duty. I do not believe that our values are stronger because we allow individuals to own weapons designed for the sole purpose of killing as many people as possible. And we must not resign ourselves to these tragedies. They cannot become just another fact of American life. We have the duty, I deeply believe, to take steps to stop these mass murders that have one common element: the use of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Through hearing and markup, we have heard no compelling reason not to pass this legislation. Not a single court decision has been cited that suggests a ban is unconstitutional. No one can credibly dispute law enforcement testimony that assault weapons are more lethal than other weapons. A majority of Americans support taking action. So I urge my colleagues to vote on this amendment based on its merits, not with an eye toward politics or ratings from gun lobbying groups. It is a time to stand tall. And as Gabby Gifford said, you must act, be bold, be courageous. So I ask you to stand with the thousands of police chiefs and law enforcement officers who support this bill. Stand with the doctors and other health professionals who support this bill. Stand with the religious leaders who support this bill. And stand with the victims of gun violence and their families who support this bill. The time has come to take these weapons of war off our streets, away from criminals, grievance killers, and the mentally deranged. I urge my colleagues to stand tall and support this amendment. I yield the floor, and I thank you, Madam President.